In our New York City studio right now, Jennifer Say. She is the former top executive at Levi's, also a top United States gymnast. She is the founder of XXXY Athletics, 7-time member, U.S. women's national team. Was the U.S. women's all-round national champion in gymnastics. You have a video up about women's sports. We'll get into that in a moment, but you lived in California for a long time. You're a friend of mine, friend of the show, Jennifer. You've been fighting this battle for, hey, crazy idea, women's athletics should only be made up of women. What did you make of California Governor Gavin Newsom's comments yesterday about men and women's sports?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me back. It's been almost a year. Gavin, even when I was a Democrat and lived in California, I couldn't stand Gavin. He is the slimiest political creature of all political creatures. He has no principles. You know, the way I view it is, one, he said, obviously, it's not fair. We heard that, right? Yep. And then he went on to hem and haw about how, yeah, but these guys are going to kill themselves if we don't let them do it. That's basically what he said. So to my mind, what he was saying was, I want to seem sort of reasonable and moderate because, I want to run for president in 2028. But I'm not going to do anything about this because these poor guys really, need to compete in women so they feel good about themselves. So ladies, you're just going to have to take it. You're going to have to suck it up. That was how I kind of took the whole thing. He's had no awakening. He has no morals or principles. He is the most he's slimy. Look at him. I don't know how anybody takes this man seriously, honestly.
Jennifer, I'm sure you saw at the joint address to Congress that President Trump gave, there was a mention of the young woman who was brain damaged, so severely injured playing volleyball. Now, just to be clear, we all know volleyball is not considered a sport where you generally have to worry about much more than maybe, a sprained ankle or, it's not a sport where people get brain damage. And for a high school age or college age girl to have that risk because a biological male crushes the ball at her is something that I would think all Americans would see how absurd and really just wrong and nasty it is to allow something like that to happen. And yet Democrats just in the Senate voted against the changes necessary to protect women like that. What is it going to take? I mean, how much more of this do you think they can continue to pretend isn't happening before they have to finally see reality?
I think it's going to take us a while. I hate to say it, even though 80% of Americans agree with us. I mean, the Democrats are digging in their heels. I think Gavin's little sort of, foray yesterday is not an indication that they're going to change course. I don't know what they actually believe. I don't care what they actually believe. I don't try getting inside their heads. They're not going to admit they were wrong. And they're not going to back away from this. At some point, something will change and there'll be like a little crack and then all of a sudden it'll happen sort of slowly and then all at once. But my goal with this brand is to change the cultural conversation, because if the 80% of people with basic common sense that agree with us stood up and said it, that's when things would change. But as well as I do, I mean, you guys talk to people all day that probably are very comfortable being loud and proud about this common sense issue, but most people that agree with us aren't saying anything. They're too afraid of the names they'll be called, and they're afraid of being shunned by their friends. So we need the 80%, that majority, to stand up and say it. And I think our brand is and can be part of that, changing the cultural conversation. But I think we have a long way to go. Look at what, the Senate vote, 0 Democrats, 2 employees in the federal government in Congress have voted in favor of protecting women's sports. 0 Democrats stood for Peyton McNabb, the athlete you just referred to. I don't know what's wrong with these people, but we have a long way to go. And then I would just add to that, sorry, this is a long answer. Even if the Protect Women in Sports Act were to pass, that impacts federally funded programs, right? Like within Title IX's jurisdiction, that's in K through 12 schools and universities. It does not impact sports in the Olympic movement, private club sports. I only competed in the Olympic movement. I never competed under Title IX governance. 2/3, I think it's 2 times as many athletes are competing in the U.S. in the Olympic movement than in Title IX's governance. So that's like a whole other can of worms we have to solve for. So again, I think it's the culture that has to change, and then these governing bodies will have to do what the people want.
What do you think would happen, Jennifer, if somebody like Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese, women's basketball players, came out and just said this is wrong? Current women's athletes, Simone Biles, someone that has a huge following as a result of that. They all know this, right? You come from the world of women's athletics. You were a incredibly successful gymnast. The people who compete in athletics know this more than the general public does. Why do you think so many women's athletes have been afraid to speak?
The same reason regular people are afraid to speak. They're afraid of the names they'll be called. They're afraid of being called right-wing, alt-right, fascist, Nazi. They're afraid they'll lose their endorsement deals, which for female athletes, more than prize money, is really how they make their money. They're afraid of being shunned by their friends. I mean, this is what happens if you have sort of professed a lefty kind of leaning publicly. You will be shunned by all of the institutions that support you. That said, if one of those women, two of those women, Serena Williams, Megan Rapinoe, that one's a joke. I know I say that as a joke. Simone Biles, if just one stood up and said it, the cascade would start. That's the cascade. That's the chink in the armor that would kind of start this whole thing. And somebody's going to eventually, but we need to hit some sort of critical mass. 80% of people agree, but probably only 5% of those actually speak up. If we got to 20, 30%, it would start to feel safer. And some brave, not that brave, semi-brave athlete will speak out. But you're right. I mean, look, if you look at gymnastics, the events in men's aren't even the same. Right? Men do 6 events. Men do rings. Women don't have rings. Why is that?
Upper body strength.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't do an iron cross when I was a gymnast, and I was really strong. I weighed very little, and I was very strong. But men just have greater upper body strength. Pommel horse is the same thing. It's so obvious. Here's another example. The Boston Marathon, which you probably know just qualified a man in the women's division for April's race. I don't know if you saw that. Did you know the women's qualifying time is 16% slower than the men's?
Sure. I mean,
yeah, it makes total sense, right?
So they know it. They reveal themselves with the rules and the regulations and all of it, but they just haven't. They're not going to make a change. I think we have a really long way to go, and I'm just going to keep hammering at the culture part of it versus the legislation. But we need federal legislation. We need state by state legislation. We're trying to get a bill on the ballot. We're trying to get something on the ballot in Colorado, where I live. I know they're doing the same in Nebraska right now. I just went and spoke there. So we need all of it. And then we need the USOPC to change their governance. The NCAA wrote a garbage policy off of the EO that's filled with loopholes. That has to change. I think they need to light it on fire, set it in the garbage, and start over. And then the Boston Marathon is governed independently. It's an independent board with corporate sponsors, funded by corporate sponsors. They get to do whatever they want. But you can bet that if the culture changed and the athletes running and all the people said this is garbage, you can't do this anymore, that eventually it would start to change. But I think we got years ahead. Sorry. No, go ahead.
Speaking of Jennifer, nope. Okay, speaking of Jennifer Say, former pro gymnast and Levi's executive, founder of XXXY Athletics, in your role on the corporate side of this, trying to speak honestly about what's going on, are you coming under a lot of heat? I feel like the left knows boycotts. It really was never that they could do boycotts. They would threaten, and then the corporations would cave, right? That was the way it actually worked. It wasn't that they had to even stay organized and really have a boycott. They just said, we're going to boycott. And they would, spam someone's Facebook page for their business. Are you coming up against people that are attacking you? I mean, I know you have a lot of people like us who support you. Or have you noticed a decline in that a little bit? I mean, are the crazies a little less on offense now about this?
I think they're more because they feel like they might be losing. It's gotten a little worse for me personally in the last few weeks in terms of the crazy. I mean, I get weird mail to my house, which is weird because then they know where you live. Although I think it's just neighbors, which is alarming. I think it's ramping up, honestly, because they're a little bit panicked that they might be losing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's so interesting because for men, I think men think this is completely ridiculous, and I've never even seen hardly any man speaking out and saying, "Oh, I'm in favor of this." They might stay quiet. Right. I think women's empathy is being taken advantage of, and they're mobilizing women.
I could not agree with you more. I say all the time they weaponize our empathy because women want to be nice. I don't know if my husband doesn't really care that much about being nice.
I don't think Jennifer, you could find a guy who has normal testosterone level for his age, who would make the case in person to you, to me, to Clay, that what's going on makes sense. Like, I think they only can do this in echo chambers and then have the anonymous online activist cadres come after people and affect, DEI and woke corporate policies, things like that. But I don't think you could get a normal... certainly, if you asked a male professional athlete to come forward and explain this to people, they would look foolish. So they can't actually make the argument out in public.
Even male brands like Bud Light is primarily a beer that was consumed by men, right? Yeah. I don't think there are that many women like, oh, I love Bud Light, right? I mean, I know they drink it because it's there and things like that. But men, when they did that stupid, I don't even remember that person's name now. They did the Dylan Mulvaney beer can. Men just said, I'll drink Coors Light or I'll drink Miller Lite. Now, partly that's Bud Light's fault because the brand doesn't taste that much different than another. And people are going to get fired up at me about this.
No, you're right.
Light beers, generally speaking, when they are mass produced, whether it's Bud Light, Miller Lite, Coors Light, there's not some massive difference. It's not like this was a Guinness or a Heineken or something where if you're a beer drinker, you're like, oh, that tastes substantially different. But men just said, we're not going to stand for this. And I think, Jennifer, one, I love your brand, and I would encourage people to go check it out because you are doing this. You're fighting back against it. But I do think women are taken advantage of in many ways over this issue in a way that men just are like, yeah, we're not doing this.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Women, we want to be nice. We don't want to exclude anyone. We don't want anyone to hate us. I mean, I did this for years. And this makes people mad. And they think first they think the names they call you will get you to stop talking. Then they realize you won't stop talking. And so they do it to signal strongly to others that they better keep their mouths shut, or else the same thing that happened to Jen will happen to you. You might have to move out of your city that you love. You might have to change jobs. You might have to find new friends, all these things. Your family might not talk to you. And for most women, that's enough disincentive, And while women also want to be nice and they want to be liked and they want to be inclusive, they also can be, I think women are the cancel culture leaders because they can also be really nasty. And they tend not to do it the way that men do it, which is, get in your face. They do it behind your back, which is really what cancel culture is. So it's a really, messed up, ugly dynamic. And to your point, women will literally advocate against their own self-interest here. They'll say, oh yeah, of course this guy can compete against my daughter and he can have her trophy because I'm nice. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I want to be nice. Well, you know what? Screw that. I will not advocate against my own best interest or my daughter's best interest, but almost more importantly, I will not say a lie. And the fact is, men cannot become women. Men are faster and stronger. That's why women's sports exist. It's all very simple. And I will tell you, at some point in the future, I don't know if it's 2 years or 5 years or 10, everybody will acknowledge this and pretend they never said the dumbest stuff you can imagine right now.
I'll give you an example for people to just kind of bring this home. Any woman who decides to identify as a man is never getting voted man of the year the first year that they're a man. Men would just not stand for it. There are lots of men who decide to become a woman that have been named woman of the year in the very first year that they're even claiming to be a woman. And that has become very common. Jennifer, for people who agree with you, what is your brand? Where should they go?
You go to xx-xyathletics.com. Check it out. We are growing our product line every day. We just dropped a bunch of new stuff today. We do have a ton of men's stuff. We've got great high performance product. There's stuff with big loud branding. There's stuff that's more quietly branded if you're not quite ready to kind of blast to the world. Check it out. We have 5 stars. I mean, I think on average we have thousands of reviews. I think 4.9 out of 5 stars is the average. So people love the product. They come for the mission and they stay for the product.
Product's great. My wife loves it. She wears it all over the place. Jennifer, keep up the fight. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, you guys too.